Seated.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, hi, I'm David Cryer. I'm the director of the Institute of Politics. We want to welcome each and every one of you this evening. We have a wonderful program for the next hour. At 10 minutes until 9, the pizza line will open, and you may go through the pizza line. I know some of you will look forward to that. At 9 o'clock sharp, we're going to watch the debate. And this could well be that very few moments tonight, the hour and a half, that could determine the presidency of the United States. Let me begin this evening by quoting from a Boston Globe columnist, David Ninan, world-famous columnist for the Boston Globe, who wrote on Sunday, and I quote, "If you don't vote, you don't count." I'm going to repeat that. If you don't vote, you don't count. And I hope that you will think about that tonight as we bring you some of the political advertising of the year 2000 for the presidential race. During the primaries in New Hampshire and other states, the people of Massachusetts and this part of the world got to see an awful lot of political advertising that we down in Arkansas did not. Right now, they're seeing advertising in Arkansas and Missouri and Michigan and Wisconsin and Ohio that we're not seeing in this area of the United States. Tonight, we're going to bring you some of the commercial television spots as to where the candidates are spending about 95% of all of their money trying to reach the voters in this very close and in this very critical campaign for the presidency. Tonight, we have two of the really top flight, foremost authorities on politics in America. First, on my left, the left side here, the left wing, I should
Very
say,
appropriate, I might say,
is the one and only Ray Strother. In 1979, Ray Strother was one of about 2 political consultants in Washington, D.C. I think there are 600 of them there. He is called the godfather of modern political consultants. He has done many things. He has handled many Democratic campaigns for the Senate and other races. But his most important achievement in life was last year he was a fellow right here in the Institute of Politics, Ray Strother. On my right is a gentleman who I've just really gotten to know in the last several weeks, and for the life of me, every time I look up, I think he is trying to convert every Harvard student to Republicanism. And I don't know how far along he's succeeding, but Rick Davis, of course, is a fellow this semester in the Institute of Politics, and how proud we are to have him here. He does a study group in the afternoon. What afternoons? Tuesday afternoons. And Rick, among other things, his most immediate claim to fame, he was the campaign director for Senator John McCain, who came by and had a few words this afternoon with us. We're going to show you tonight some spots. We're going to turn on the TV right now. We're going to see the spots. Yes, no, we're going to see the spots right now, and we'll talk about debates later. Okay?
There's a moment in history when we have the chance to focus on tough problems. It's not always popular to say our children can't read, or Social Security needs improving, or we have a budget surplus and a deficit in values. But those are the right things to say. And the right way to make America better for everyone is to be bold and decisive, to unite instead of divide. Now is the time to do the hard things.
(1969), America in turmoil. Al Gore graduates college. His father, a U.S. Senator, opposes the Vietnam War. Al Gore has his doubts, but enlists in the Army. When he comes home from Vietnam, The last thing he thinks he'll ever do is enter politics. He starts a family with Tipper, becomes an investigative reporter. Then Al Gore decided that to change what was wrong in America, he had to fight for what was right. He ran for Congress, held some of the first hearings on cleaning up toxic waste, made the environment his cause, broke with his own party to support the Gulf War, fought to reform welfare with work requirements and time limits. His fight now is to ensure that prosperity enriches all our families, not just the few. Strengthen Social Security. Take on big drug companies to guarantee prescription drugs for seniors. Hold schools accountable for results. Tax cuts for working families and the middle class. Al Gore, married 30 years, father of 4, fighting for us.
Comment on those two ads, Rick?
Thank you, Senator Pryor. I think it's important to know a couple of things. One is, these are ads that are playing in battleground states over the last couple of 3 weeks. And so you'd ask the first question, why are we hearing bio spots 2 months before the end of an election with one guy who's been vice president and ran for president prior to that, but for 8 years, and another fellow who has the name Bush and is a governor of Texas and ran in probably the most visible primary in our party's history. And I'd have to say that tells you a lot. These guys ran in primaries in 6 states, really only 6 states, where lots of TV was played and lots of activity was made. And the rest of the country, we're really wondering, who are these guys? We don't really know them as well as Massachusetts does, because they got all the full brunt of both New Hampshire and Super Tuesday media. So they have to introduce themselves. My observation of these spots, Bush is obviously catering to women in his spot. It's a very soft thing. You see the sort of boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife picture. He's got, at the time this spot ran, 19-point deficit with women. I'd have to say with the Al Gore spot, it was interesting because he had half his spot, which was twice as long as Bush's, to introduce himself. And it was catering to the men crowd. Vietnam War experience took up half that spot. In fact, if you took Vietnam out of the Al Gore spot, you had a good 30-second spot similar to Bush's. So I do think that it's interesting that at this late date, we're being reintroduced to these guys even after the conventions and in a way that will target their specific voter groups that they're trying to get.
Ray?
Well, first thing I'd like to say is I had not seen these ads until today because we don't see them in Washington, D.C., because it's not a battleground state. But I want you to remember that television is a chess game, and ads are impossible to judge in this context. Unless you know exactly who the target is and the purpose of the ad and the timing, you can't really say whether it's a good or bad ad. Virtually impossible. I can't. And I've done this for 200 or 300 years.
But those Lincoln ads.
Gettysburg Address was too short. But you can judge production values, and what you'll find in production values, the Republican ads are a little bit better in production values than the Democratic ads. Hate to say that, but that's what I found today. But more than that, you'll find that these are fairly plebeian ads. There's no great creativity here. There's nothing that would strike you as distinctive about these ads. There was only one distinctive thing about these ads, and they're ads trying to establish who these guys are, and they both want to move the middle. Bush didn't want to be in the right wing, and Gore didn't want to be on the left wing. They're both trying to get to the middle, and that's Vietnam, and that's family values, that's all the other things you saw, and that's what they're trying to do. But the most peculiar thing about the Gore ad was it never mentioned he'd been vice president. And I thought that was very strange. He mentioned all of the steps he made along the way, the 8 or 9 months he spent in Vietnam, all of the other things he did, and did not mention in any way that he was vice president of the United States. Very peculiar. So what you'll find as we go through tonight, these ads are the result of polling. And if it doesn't poll well, it doesn't go in the ad. And I'm just guessing, but it's an educated guess. I would say that being vice president didn't poll terribly well.
Okay. Do y'all remember about 6 weeks ago an advertisement that the Republicans ran, and they called it rats? Remember the rats?
They weren't the ones calling
Okay,
it rats.
now that's no, the Democrats called it. All right, watch this ad very, very carefully, because if you really study it, you might be able to see rats in this. We're going to run 4 quick ads right here, and then we'll have, once again, comments from our commentator.
Under Clinton-Gore, prescription drug prices have skyrocketed, and nothing's been done. George Bush has a plan. Add a prescription drug benefit to Medicare.
every senior will have access to prescription drug benefits.
And Al Gore? Gore opposed bipartisan reform. He's pushing a big government plan that lets Washington bureaucrats interfere with what your doctors prescribe. The Gore prescription plan, bureaucrats decide. The Bush prescription plan, seniors choose.
The new prescription drug ad for George Bush. The New York Times says its accuracy is 0. Bush has no specific plan, and the approach he favors provides no prescription benefit for half of all seniors without coverage today. Bush leaves out middle-class seniors and takes no action to slow the rising cost of prescription drugs. Al Gore, a detailed plan to reduce costs and provide coverage for every senior through Medicare. Bush sides with the drug companies. Gore's plan helps all seniors. The new prescription drug ad for George Bush. The New York Times says its accuracy is 0. Bush has no specific plan, but the approach he favors allows HMOs and insurance companies to limit what doctor-prescribed medicines seniors get. And Bush leaves middle-class seniors with no prescription coverage at all. Bush sides with the big drug companies. Al Gore gives all seniors a choice of prescription drug coverage under Medicare. The Gore plan lets doctors, not bureaucrats, decide what medicines you need. The issue, prescription drugs. George Bush's approach leaves millions of seniors with no prescription drug coverage, none. And Bush forces seniors he does include to go to HMOs and insurance companies for coverage. The National Council of Senior Citizens says the Bush approach is favored by big drug companies and leaves millions with no help. Al Gore is taking on big drug companies to pass a real prescription drug benefit that covers all seniors. George Bush siding with the big drug companies. The Gore plan, fighting for our seniors.
Okay, Ray Struthers going to comment on this.
Well, I have two observations about this. I had seen the RATS ad because I was on a couple of television panels talking about the RATS ad. Let me assure you, the RATS ad was no accident. It wasn't subliminal advertising. It was somebody probably having a good time. Because we're so careful, particularly in a presidential race, with every frame of film. And we all do it the same way. We do it on a machine called an Avid, which is a digital computer that lets us look at the images digitally, a frame at a time. And I always go through and I examine every frame, and occasionally you'll find a steel worker outside a plant with the F word on his baseball cap. So you have to look for things like that. And that happens. So you have to look for things like that. So what you probably had is, I know the media producer, I don't think he was trying to be clever or cute, but you hire people. And they get bored, and they work all night, and they say, hey, come here, Ralph, let me show you what I've done. And they laugh, and they said, none of the yo-yos will ever know what we've done. Well, they got caught. So that's one point I wanted to make. There was no accident, but there was no crime or scheme to it. I'm sure of that, and I'm being charitable to Republicans there, but I don't think they're that smart. Next thing you'll find as you look through these ads is they're all built around Democratic issues. Coming into this race, Medicare, Democratic issue. Social Security, Democratic issue. Prescription drugs, Democratic issue. The Democrats held huge advantages in all of these issues. So if you're a resurgent Republican, you must claim these issues as your own. You must go out and try to seize them. If you're the Democrat, you must try to keep them from getting a toehold in your issue. So what we saw there was Bush trying to grasp and hug the issue, and Gore trying to push him away from the issue. The chess game, back and forth.
Thank you. I'm going to say only one thing about the RATS ad, and that is the person who was doing it was either lazy or stupid, and I don't disagree with anything you said. I agree. I mean, in the age of digital technology, we know this stuff's out there, and either they just didn't pay attention to what they're doing or they were trying to be cute, and they got caught. And it's okay to be cute, just don't get caught. The upshot of the whole perspective on this, though, is you saw one Bush drug ad and 3 Gore drug ads. That's not just because we're good at capturing Gore drug ads and we're not good at capturing Bush drug ads. That's because there was one Bush drug ad and 3 Gore drug ads. And that means, what does that tell you? That Bush is on a defensive about drug ads and basically wanted to get in there, as similar to what Ray was saying, and say, look, I've got a plan. I'm not going to tell you anything that's in the plan, but I've got a plan. And, well, it's 30 seconds. And so, you know, here's the deal. I'm not opposed to having a drug plan for seniors. And then Gore, who believes this is how he gets elected, pounds away at this thing. I think there's a fatal flaw in the GORE ad, and different from Rats, obviously. And the fatal flaw is attacking prescription drug companies. How many people have heard him, since the first debate, attack a prescription drug company? Not really? I mean, I haven't heard him say anything about prescription drug companies since the first debate. Because what happened is they probably took a poll, and the shrill tone, remember, this ad probably was aired maybe about 3 weeks ago. And at the time, you remember Al Gore was out launching this attack, very populist approach, and he was going to say, look, I'm going to protect you from insurance companies, I'm going to protect you from drug companies, I'm going to protect you from big banks. I mean, you know, he was going to basically be the populist in this campaign. And something happened, because all of a sudden one day that disappeared. And I think what happened was that people were getting a little scared of the guy. I mean, it's one thing to say that you want a plan, but it's another thing to be against drug companies. And I'm not sticking up for the drug companies. Heaven knows they've got their own problems. But as a candidate for president, you got to be careful who you're picking as enemies. And it's not that the drug companies are not a bad enemy. It's just the people were getting uncomfortable with the notion that he was going to launch this sort of cultural war against big business. And I think this day and age, what we see is big business has some warts to it, but it's not that bad either. And so I don't think the populist argument in this set of spots was what was really playing so well. The other thing I would have to say, too, is we don't see the drug debate going on today. It had its heyday 3 weeks ago. Al Gore was ahead 3 weeks ago, probably because we were debating drug prescription pricing and Medicare access for drugs. All of a sudden, that debate is gone. Now we're talking about national defense, we're talking about foreign policy, things that are happening around the world, and drugs aren't in that debate. And it's interesting to see how the polls have shifted. So, into the next series.
Okay, this next ad is reinventing Gore, and the next ad is drug plan. Dim the lights, please.
Oh, there's Al Gore running himself on television again. Like I'm not going to notice? Who's he going to be today? The Al Gore who raised his campaign money at a Buddhist temple? Or the one who now promises campaign finance reform? Really? Al Gore, claiming credit for things he didn't even do.
I took the initiative in creating the internet.
Yeah, and I invented the remote control, too. Another round of this and I'll sell my television.
Again, is... Al Gore and George Bush, two very different prescription drug plans. Al Gore provides prescription drug coverage to every senior in America directly through Medicare. George Bush forces seniors to go to HMOs and insurance companies for coverage. And Bush leaves millions of middle-class seniors with no coverage at all. The Gore plan, prescription drugs for every senior through Medicare. The Bush plan, prescription drugs through HMOs and insurance companies. And for millions of the middle class, no coverage. Two plans, a big difference.
We crisp up our answers a little bit. We have 22 total spots, and this is 7 and 8, so we've got to keep rolling.
All right. The RNC ad that you just saw, which was the Bush ad, is interesting because there's a new phenomena in this presidential election cycle, which is it's okay for the campaign committees, the RNC and the Democratic Campaign Committee, to attack, but that the campaigns themselves, Bush and Gore, have spent a great deal of time not attacking in their ads. I doubt if, watching these ads, anybody here could tell me which were the RNC ads and which were the Bush ads, and vice versa. So I think it's sort of a hollow approach. But the upshot of it is this was definitely a Republican National Committee attack ad. And what it did is it showed you where they wound up, which is the trust issue with Al Gore. And Al Gore, in the first debate, led with his chin. This ad was playing about a week and a half before the debate. I don't think in their wildest imaginations the Bush campaign had any idea that they would be able to link trust with exaggerations. But Gore gave them that on a silver platter in the first debate, and now, whether they use this commercial or not, it's now going to mean something different. And I think that's partially what's hurt Gore over this last period of time.
Ray Strother.
Well, the interesting thing about the first ad, I think, which was a negative ad, of course, but it was cleverly done, where a woman was narrating. The reason a woman was narrating is it softens the blow of an ad. People don't think women are as negative as men, and often you can say more mean and hateful things if you're a woman and get away with it, then you can't.
I thought you were talking about wives.
Another subject. But using
Y'all
a woman
getting in trouble.
Using a woman's voice was a way to soften the impact of the ad, which is a pretty good ad. The next ad, the attack ad, was a conventional attack ad. And what happens is people are sort of tuning out to conventional attack ads, and when you're all finished tonight, I want you to remember, after you've seen all 20 ads, there's going to be a lot of mush in this audience. It's a very bright audience, and you won't be able to tell us a lot except overall impressions.
Okay, we have 3 ads coming up now. Let's see.
4 ads.
4 ads. Okay, this is Patient Bill of Rights, number 9.
Doctor says you need a particular specialist or some treatment. If you've got an HMO or an insurance company, a lot of times some bean counter behind a computer terminal who doesn't have a license to practice medicine and doesn't have a right to play God will overrule the doctor's orders. I'm telling you, we need a patient's Bill of Rights to take the medical decisions away from the HMOs and insurance companies and give them back to the doctors and the nurses.
It will strengthen Social Security and Medicare for the greatest generation and for generations to come. I believe great decisions are made with care, made with conviction. We will make prescription drugs available and affordable for every senior who needs them. You earned your benefits. You made your plans, and President George W. Bush will keep the promise of Social Security. No changes, no reductions, no way.
George W. Bush says he has a plan for children's health care. But why hasn't he done it in Texas? Texas ranks 49th out of 50 in providing health coverage to kids. It's so bad, a federal judge just ruled Texas must take immediate corrective action. The judge's findings: Bush's administration broke a promise to improve health care for kids. The needs of abused kids are neglected. Texas failed to inform families of health coverage available to 1 million children. The Bush record, it's becoming an issue.
Medical errors at birth left Ian Malone needing constant care, but the HMO began cutting him off against doctors' orders.
We had gotten to a point of complete desperation.
Al Gore heard their story and fought back.
Told the insurance company, don't do this, don't cut this child's coverage.
Al Gore got the Malone family the help they needed, but knowing that all families need protection from HMO abuses, he's fighting for a real patient's Bill of Rights.
Even if he fought half as hard for the people of our country as he did for my son, nobody loses.
Okay, the work called cinema verite. That's where you let the candidates do their own thing, and you take a camera and you film it and you take it back and you say, what the hell do I do with all this film? And you make commercials out of it. And it's an old technique that I began using in the late 60s, early 70s. It's very difficult. What I didn't like about the GORE ad, cinema verite, is he has a microphone and he has a barricade with the people behind it, and he's known to be aloof and cold, and he's about 200 yards from the people, and he's giving a speech in a microphone. When I did his race in '88, I put him in the middle of working men, and I gave them a few beers and some questions to ask him, but I didn't let him know in advance. What they were going to ask him, and I think the result was remarkably good. They were trying to do this. It was cinema verite. The Bush people did the same thing. They also filmed a couple of rallies, and they had side shots, they had close shots, and it fit together fine. I mean, it was a way to put their candidate on television, but the candidate wasn't connecting with you. He wasn't looking at you and talking to you. He's talking to other folks. It's a candidate out there, and that's the problem with it. And then the other thing, the chess game, credibility. George Bush is running on his record as governor of Texas because that's all he has to run. He's running up for leader of the free world from having been governor 4 years in Texas. So he has to be very successful at that. Chess game, tear him down.
Okay, Rick Davis.
Yeah, I think the technique that was used, and it was good to see these two together, because what they basically show you is neither candidate has the capacity to look into a camera lens and talk to you. So they used whatever they could. The Bush, I think, ad works better because it's actually in a formal setting, and it's sort of presidential, which I'm for because neither one of these guys looked particularly presidential throughout the course of this campaign. And what it was convention footage, and they used it from his speech at the convention, which they're all sitting around in a room going, wow, you know, we really turned up the dial and got a lot of votes the night we gave this convention speech. We've got to use it again. And so after all this money and effort and, you know, these high-paid speechwriters that you get to write this speech, you're sitting around lugging this thing around. It's been given one time, and you're thinking, God, we've got to use it some more. So they plow it into a commercial, and they stick it on, and they don't understand why it doesn't turn people on, because It was great when he gave it live on television, but canned in a 30-second spot just doesn't do the trick. I think the GORE, I can't agree more with what Ray said about the GORE ad. It's basically the same thing. They set up a nice place, they got a nice day, they got lucky, they got decent lighting, and then they just didn't bother putting him in a position to do anything to connect with voters. And so, he's dancing around a stage, never looks into the camera one single time, and you get good profile shots of him, and he looks nice in that blue shirt. But other than that, there's not much going on in that ad. I do think that the Texas commercial here showed you a line of attack, which I think what GORE will do, not only tonight, but for the rest of the campaign, which is make the Texas record an issue for George Bush to defend. And I do think that that's probably how he closes his campaign. This is the first time we've really seen the use of it in this ad, and that was only a week ago. I do think, though, that GORE will back off of this use of examples like the Ian Maloney commercial. I mean, he got into trouble on that commercial because it wasn't exactly what he had in mind. He got into trouble in the first debate because he used all these examples that weren't exactly what he was saying about. And I think his campaign is paranoid at this stage that they don't want to use any real-life people anymore in their campaign for fear of what they're going to find out.
Okay, let's look at ad number 13. This is a Bush ad.
Al Gore's prescription plan forces seniors into a government-run HMO. Governor Bush gives seniors a choice. Gore says he's for school accountability, but requires no real testing. Governor Bush requires tests and holds schools accountable for results. Gore's targeted tax cuts leave out 50 million people, half of all taxpayers. Under Bush, every taxpayer gets a tax cut, and no family pays more than a third of their income to Washington. Governor Bush has real plans that work for real people.
Al Gore's promising campaign finance reform. Can I believe him? Because of Gore's last fundraising campaign, 22 people have been indicted, 12 convicted, 70 took the Fifth Amendment, and 18 witnesses fled the country. Now Al Gore is promising more accountability in our schools, and that sounds good. Until you find out he doesn't require any real testing. And no testing means no accountability. Just more politics from Al Gore.
George Bush and I actually agree on accountability in education.
The GORE plan begins with accountability.
We need smaller classes and better trained teachers.
100,000 more teachers to lower class size, increase discipline and learning.
We need help for middle-class families to pay college tuition by making it tax deductible.
A $10,000 deduction every year for college tuition.
We are making education the #1 priority.
The first ad was a classic contrast ad. My plan does this, his plan doesn't. My plan does this, his plan doesn't. It also shows you a line of attack that Bush has opened up, which I think is actually a good thing for him, and that is that, look, you want a big government? Al Gore. You want limited government and out of your life? Me. And it's the first time he's actually enunciated a basic Republican principle of governance. And it's great, finally, as a Republican, to see this kind of front opened up. Because up to this point in time, he's spending money on drug benefits, he's spending money on Medicare, he's spending money on the surplus to do other things. And it was beginning to get a little fuzzy as to who was the Democrat and who was the Republican. So I'm glad that this front is opened up. It actually gives people a choice. The other two ads are great because what you see is Bush saying, look, there's no accountability in the Gore ad, and then you see Gore saying, I agree with Bush, I've got accountability. And what happens here is you run the first ad attacking Gore because you find out maybe that women are starting to move away from you in Michigan, and so you got to get this thing up and attack him on education because it's the one issue that you've got parity with. And then all of a sudden Gore finds it out, and within 24 hours he's got this response ad up to muddy the water on accountability. And generally it'll work because you'll see Al Gore isn't accountable as many times as you're going to see Al Gore is accountable. And the use of actually saying George Bush and I agree is a wonderful little trait that usually doesn't at that stage go responded to.
Give us your thoughts, Ray.
I think it was interesting in these ads because you begin to see the campaigns shift toward women. This campaign, this presidential race now really is about women. It's not about anybody else. That's who's out there and undecided. That's where the vote, the swing vote is. And they're both going to try in the last 3 weeks to appeal to women. Most men are either hardcore Democrats like me, or they're Republicans. Because men have become more and more Republican. Women have become more and more Democratic. But for a Democrat to win, they must have women. Well, to keep a Democrat from winning, Bush must capture some women. And the way to do that is things like health care and education. And education's been his primary vehicle to try to capture women, and we saw that there.
Okay, we've got 4 more 30-second spots right here. Let's go.
On prescription medicines, compare. Al Gore will charge seniors a new $600 a year government access fee. George Bush opposes Gore's $600 fee. Gore's plan? When seniors turn 64, they must join a drug HMO selected by Washington, or they're on their own. Bush's plan? Seniors choose, and it covers all catastrophic health care costs. Gore's plan doesn't, and has a government HMO, and a $600 fee. A prescription for disaster.
Before you look at George W. Bush's plans, look at his record. When the national minimum wage was raised to $5.15 an hour, Bush kept the Texas minimum wage at $3.35. When Congress passed a law to help states provide health insurance for kids, Bush opposed its expansion to 220,000 children in Texas. And a federal judge had to step in, ruling Texas fails to provide adequate health care for children. George Bush, his real plans hurt real people.
Newspapers say George Bush's prescription drug ad misrepresents the facts. In fact, Al Gore's plan covers all seniors through Medicare, not an HMO. Under Gore, seniors choose their own doctor, and doctors decide what drugs to prescribe. George Bush forces seniors to go to HMOs and insurance companies for prescription drugs. They have no choice, and Bush leaves millions of middle-class seniors with no coverage. Al Gore, the only prescription plan that gives all seniors coverage and choice. Vietnam veteran, father of 4, married 30 years. Al Gore will fight for families. Tax cuts for middle-class families, including a $10,000 a year tax deduction for college tuition. Continue welfare reform with time limits, work requirements. Force deadbeat parents to take responsibility for their children. A crime victims' bill of rights to protect victims, not just criminals. Fight violence and pornography on the internet, helping parents block out what children shouldn't see. Al Gore, he'll put his values to work for us.
Well, I think the Spiral book commercial we saw in the very beginning were some consultants in a big hurry, probably in a bar room, decided they had to go back and do something that night. I've seen better city council commercials than that. And it was probably about that effective. I suspect it didn't run very long. But a thing to watch in commercials, these commercials and all commercials, is the use of newspaper headlines to actually prove your point, because people don't believe the politicians, they don't believe the paid voice, they don't believe anything they hear. So if you can use a headline, it gives you some substance, so people are using headlines. And the bio ad, why would Gore come back with another bio type ad late? I suspect it was because something happened in the campaign that we don't know about. You know, I can't tell you now. It's one of those things, I don't know why they did certain things. Something was happening in the polls that they had to counter, and the bio ad went back up. I have no idea what it would be.
Probably that first debate.
Could be.
Yeah, I thought the legal pad ad sucked too. I mean, you know, I think if they were in the bar, they were probably in there too long when they made that ad. The message actually, though, was what the effective message is, and that is that, look, we're headed toward Hillary care. I mean, I'm a little surprised we can get that far, but basically it was, look, huge expansions, out-of-control bureaucracies, things that you don't want, things that you didn't like about the Hillary drug program and the Hillary health care program that scared the country. They wanted to conjure up and get back in the public domain. I think it must have had some limited impact, because the third ad you saw, the ad that Gore had on his drug plan, which was very responsive, basically handled all the points that were made in the Republican ad. So something got them to put that ad back up. And usually that means you've seen a dip in the numbers, or you're worried that the other ad will hurt you. I did think that looking at the Texas record was a good ad, the second ad you saw there. I thought that real plans hurt real people is a real catchy phrase. And this is a campaign that's basically devoid of catchy phrases. And though have you heard Al Gore say that on the stump or in the news or anywhere? I mean, you know, it would be interesting to see if he could actually close the gap between what they have on the air and how he's acting every day. But then again, that's the problem with Al Gore. And so maybe tonight, you know, we'll see hurting real people with real programs. I just remember The Real Reformer, and, you know, I hated that work better than I wanted it to, too. So,
3 final ads.
58% of fourth grade kids in our low-income schools can't read. There's an education recession in America. Governor Bush has a plan. Requires strict accountability and measurements that Al Gore opposes. Propose a Teacher Protection Act that Gore won't support.
If we really want to make sure no child gets left behind in America, we need the courage to raise standards in our schools. We need more accountability and more discipline. It's easy just to spend more. Let's start by expecting more.
They say oil and water don't mix. Nowhere is that more true than in Texas. After 17 years in the oil business, George W. Bush ran for governor, then passed laws to let big polluters regulate themselves. Today, Texas is number 3 in water pollution, number 1 in air pollution. For over 20 years, Al Gore has fought against polluters and helped pass laws to clean up our air and water. America's environment is cleaner now. Do we really want it to look like Texas?
America's having a recession, an education recession, that's hurting our children. Our students rank last in the world in math and physics, and most fourth graders in our cities can't read. The Clinton-Gore education recession. It's failing our kids. But in Texas, George Bush raised standards and test scores soared. Now Texas leads the nation in academic improvement. Learn more about the Bush Blueprint for accountability, high standards, and local control.
With this last series of ads is a new front opening up on the political warfare map, and that is Bush finally getting back to what he is comfortable with, talking about education, and reacting to Al Gore by calling it an education recession. Again, finally we find some catchy phrase that you can put your finger on. The misery index was the one almost everybody remembers, at least in my generation, that Jimmy Carter was able to put together to win election. I don't know if the education recession is a strong enough concept, but it does tap into what a lot of parents feel, and that is that their kids aren't getting the education they want, and that the government isn't doing enough about it. In this case, actually, George Bush is on the government side with solutions. I did think that the oil and water ad was a very effective ad. Again, all along the same line, make the Texas record be something that he's got to pay a price for. I have never seen the needle move in a presidential race on environmental issues. This may be the first time where you see a lot of that happening. When we were doing the McCain campaign, we gave 3 speeches, important speeches, on the environment in a Republican primary. Figure that one out. But I do think it's a new issue in this cycle that I think we're going to see whether or not it actually has any legs.
Ray?
Well, actually, there was an issue when Dukakis ran because George Bush used Boston Harbor as an example of pollution. So it was an issue. But I'm not going to go into these ads because I think I've said everything I have to say about Target and everything, but I want to say the word women again because you can see the campaign beginning to focus on women here. And in this, you've seen old people reaching for drugs, you've seen little children studying, but you know what you haven't seen, and this is my time for a sermon, haven't seen any of you. You haven't seen any college students in any of these ads. Have you noticed? If you're under 35, you don't make it in political ads. You know why you don't make it in political ads? You don't vote, you don't matter, and you don't count. And we don't waste money on you. Because this is about efficiency, because you aim your ads where your voters are. And if you don't vote, why am I going to spend a lot of time going to your college campuses? Harvard's a little different. People come here, they like the name Harvard. They like to be associated with Harvard. But basically, it's hard to get a presidential candidate to a college campus. Why waste your time? Unless there's a lot of press there to cover it, why waste your time? So until students get involved in the process and don't wait until they're 40 years old, which is about the time people get involved in the process after they buy their first house, change is going to come very slowly. If you're really interested in change and do more than just flap your lips, which is what I find going on, get out and vote, organize, carry signs, go door to door, do something. You just don't sit here.
Excellent. Let's do this. Thank you very much. Let's give each of our friends this evening 1 minute to summarize what they think of the entire bank of ads that have been run in the year 2000, please, Ray. I mean, let me call on Rick first, and then Ray.
Well, I don't think anybody's going to sit around thinking about these the day after the campaign. I mean, I think they're generally boring. They don't excite me. There's no energy. There's no enthusiasm. I feel strongly that the first candidate, maybe tonight, that shows that they actually want to be President of the United States and defender of the free world is going to get a lot of votes. And right now, I think the campaign's basically being waged on the fact that nobody's terribly excited about either one, and the first guy who pops up is going to be able to make quite a hit. I'm actually hoping tonight that we see George Bush build off of 2 good debate performances and come out and say, look, it's important for me to be president for a lot of reasons. There are stakes in this election. Elections have consequences, and he spells out some of those consequences. If not, I think we go into the last and final step watching these things and again, sort of being bored to tears.
Okay.
I think this is the most mediocre advertising I've ever seen in a presidential race, to be subtle. But I don't want to pin the tail on either of the candidates, and really even on their media producers, because something's happened in the last few years, and I've been doing this for so long, I've watched it happen. Pollsters have become more and more important in campaigns, and now they dominate in campaigns. And what they've done is they're literally forcing people to take a list of things they think should be in an ad and forcing them to put all these items on a screen. You see all the type coming on the screen? I call those pollster ads. Pollsters love those because they say, if you say these 6 things, your points go up 11. If you say these, women will go up 3 points. So what they've done is they've milked and squeezed the creativity out of advertising, out of political advertising. It's this way everywhere. These ads are no better or no worse than city council ads because they're all the same. And what happens in the end, when it's all over, they'll have very little impact because the press covers these races, this presidential race, beautifully. The same result would have happened had there been no paid advertising.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, we have had a real pleasure tonight listening to 2 masters of their trade. Let's give them a big hand. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Very great. Now, if you want some pizza, go through the line, but be very quiet and considerate of everyone else as we listen to the debate. Thank you. Hey, y'all.